Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, the show that offers you tips and strategies to help speakers build the business of their dreams. Now here's your host, 30-year industry veteran and business coach, Jane Atkinson.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. You know, we always have your well-being in mind. Over here, we're thinking about you all the way around, not just on the platform. So we've brought in Dr. Jason Jones to help us sort through health, wellness, energy for speakers. Welcome, Jason, to the podcast.
Thank you, Jane. Welcome. It's great to be here.
Now, you have also been a part of my world. You've come up through our mastermind, and it's been absolutely fantastic to have a bird's eye view of your speaking business. Tell everybody what your speaking business looks like today.
Certainly. And like many others, it's evolved over time.
Yes.
I've been a full-time speaker for just now right at 5 years. So January, my fifth year as a full-time, nobody paying me but my clients type of speaker. As you know, over the past 5 years, it's been a little up and down, right? With occurrences in our world and pandemics and things like that. So it has changed a bit. Right now, my business is made up about 50% of my revenues is from keynote speaking, and the other 50% is from executive coaching, and then also doing some leadership type of training. And maybe a little minuscule piece of that is an online course that I have as well.
Okay. And when you do your executive coaching, what specifically are you kind of promising? What is the topic that you are discussing with these executives?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, it's leadership development. And so the vast majority of those who I coach are wanting to up-level their leadership in one way or another. And so there's a number of different reasonings behind that, right? Whether it's interpersonal skill or stress management and prioritization, or sometimes it's just in basic, delegation and accountability with their people. So that is, probably the main piece of that. But then I have some other type of coaching that I do that are real specific type of things. Can you help me with a speech that I'm working on? Another one might be, I've got one that is specifically an executive leader for emotional intelligence, and really up-leveling that, and that person saying, I need help specifically in this area. And then I've got a couple of that are related to high performance and brain optimization, and a leader that was in burnout and having major health issues. And their company essentially said, hey, we will pay for you to get an executive coach to help you work through this. And so we spend the vast majority of our time working on their well-being, how they're managing their calendar, and how they're influencing, but in a way that they're putting themselves first. And they can do this for the long haul, not just for the short term.
And I think that's really where we want to go today, is to talk about how we as individuals, not just as speakers or executives, but we're all in a position where sometimes we end up last on the list. Sometimes we end up either approaching or deep in the throes of burnout. And sometimes there's just massive levels of stress, like at the beginning of COVID, when all of my clients and you kind of lost your calendars to a pandemic. There's a lot of different things. And so you really focus, and this has been the topic of at least one of your books, correct? On the brain. Talk a little bit about what some titles of your books are, and which we're going to drill down on at least the one that is very specific to brain equals performance, performed at a higher level.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first book I wrote was more related to motivation and teams. And that was about 9 years ago, released in 2014.
What was that called?
And it was called 28 Days to a Motivated Team.
Okay, that's good.
And so that was really building in a lot of my dissertation work and my work in working with teams and team leaders in the corporate world. And
Okay.
it is an outflow of people saying, hey, help me learn how to do this. How do I run a team meeting? How do I run an offsite for our team? And so that's what kind of built that, the framework of that book.
Okay.
And why I wrote it. A couple of years ago, I released my most recent book, which is called Activator: Using Brain Science to Deepen or to Boost Motivation, Deepen Engagement, and Supercharge Performance. So that really is kind of the past 10 to 12 years of work that I've done, where my PhD work and my corporate work over the years has been the area of organizational behavior, leadership development, those sorts of things. And then I moved that into and saw the real impact of neuroscience. And over the past 10 to 15 years, there's just been a plethora of new data, new ways to measure the brain, and its application now to all areas of pretty much human life. Is amazing, but specifically what I study and look at how to communicate to people is in the areas of leadership, work behavior, and then also performance optimization. And so that's, if you get that book, Activator, it's really about how do we light up the brain for ourselves and for other people. And the work that's out there shows that when our brain is lit up in multiple areas, like a Christmas tree, we are at optimal states of performance as well as optimal states of life experience. We feel our best and we are doing our best and we're giving our best.
Not to go down a rabbit hole here, but tiny little side branch. I just found out that when you have I have an aging parent with Alzheimer's, and her hearing aid, one of her ears isn't working right now. And I've heard that when people with dementia don't wear their hearing aids, their brain isn't lighting up the way it should. And they're not getting kind of like the mental stimulation that they should be from sound. And so I'm kind of freaking out and trying to get her hearing aid fixed ASAP. So that's got me thinking about the brain a fair bit. Talk a little bit about us day to day. So we're talking about people who run a speaking business. They are leaders in their own life, leaders in their own businesses. Some of them run bigger teams than others. Talk about what some of the performance blockers might be.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of take this, and let me take a step back and just talk about what we know from the research to be the most to be the perspective or the approach to be the most science-based.
Okay.
From both a behavioral and a neuroscience perspective, and that is what is called the theory of flow.
Okay.
And some of you've probably heard that, and I know many of your listeners have heard about the concept of flow. It was hypothesized, kind of theorized by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. That one takes a lot of practice.
Yes.
Well
done.
In graduate school, we one of our tests was we got bonus points if we could pronounce that name correctly. And
well done. You're still scoring points for that.
my professor was a friend of Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, and was really adamant about that we knew how to say his name correctly.
Oh, for sure.
And the reason why, because he knew in the future, now fast forward 20 years, we'd be talking about this more. So over the past 20 years or so, there's been a great deal of research, many research studies, all peer reviewed, both from a neuroscience as well as behavioral science perspective of the idea of flow. And what flow is this is the experience we have when we are at our best. When our brain is feeling and functioning at its highest level. Now think about a time when you've had this before, right? This is this zone between both challenge and then your skill. It is where you are in the zone, you're in that flow, that you have this extremely sharp clarity in terms of what you're thinking and how you're working within that. So you can think of this from a sports perspective or activities. When someone's gardening, you lose track of time. You are at your best, at your peak, and when you do that, you usually are performing at your peak as well, and it's easy.
Yes, it's
It
not
just
difficult. In the
flows.
flow is
Yes.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for speakers, let's think about that. When you get into the flow, you get in the zone on stage, right? And sometimes it's hard to kind of get into that at the very beginning, and it kind of takes that comfort. But then when you get into it, guess what? Time flies, doesn't it?
Yes.
We've all been in that situation where we look up and we go, oh no, I got 5 minutes left according to the timer, and I have 10 minutes left of content. And a lot of that has to do with we kind of got caught up in the flow, right? Because we lost track of things, of the time around us. That's the idea of flow. And not only is a perspective of being able to perform our best, but now we know from the neuroscience and behavioral science that there's a cycle of this. It's how your brain literally works. And not only does your neurochemistry change during the cycle, but also your brain waves change during the cycle. And here's the thing. If we don't watch it, we block ourselves from being able to get into flow or to be able to stay into flow. And so I can share some of practically speaking what those are. Some of it might be not giving yourself enough time. Some of it is higher levels of stress or not sleeping enough. It could be poor brain optimization from a health perspective. It could be lack of clarity of what your topic is or what you're speaking on. It could be mindset, distraction. There's a lot of those things that are part of that, but I'm happy to kind of share a little bit more about why this is important.
I love it.
Kind of what that process looks like for people to get
I love this. I'm glad that you brought up mindset, because if you had any kind of preconceived notion about how tough this audience was going to be, it might take you longer to get into flow because you think it's going to be a hard go, right? Somebody can say something to you 2 minutes before you go on that could lodge a thought into your brain that could take you off your game, and there you go. You have to struggle to bring it back. Yeah.
You're right. You hit the nail on the head on this. And stress is probably the biggest flow blocker that we have. Yes. And so as leaders, as speakers, no matter what you're doing in your business, you're getting on a phone call and you're having that first initial conversation with a potential client, that stress can hit us. And yes, it could be from a poor mindset. It could be, from just you're not managing stress well, right? And how you determine that you're going to deal with stress. I've got an example of what you're even saying.
Please.
And so I spoke a couple of years ago to, I'm at the point now in speaking that I don't get very nervous usually, unless it's something different or big, and then I might have that little twinge of nervousness. But I know my topic well. I've done my speeches many times, right? But it was a newer speech, but I had it down pat. And it was for a Disrupt HR speech in a city outside of mine, in Oklahoma City. And I was realizing right before I went on, I was more nervous than I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm like, why is this? And I get up on stage, and not only was I nervous for that first minute, I kind of stumbled around a little bit, and I got cotton mouth, and I never get cotton mouth. And on reflection on all that, I realized what my stress came from was the fact that this was a different setup, a different format that I'd ever done before. You have 5 minutes, and you have you have to have a certain amount of slides, and you get like maybe 5 or 10 seconds per slide, and everything is timed out. I was focused on the process, not on the outcome and the people and the content. That's right. And I didn't have confidence in that. and
Yeah.
that up-leveled my stress. And I didn't perform as well as I wanted to in that because of that stress.
Yeah, I would call that like almost a showcase type situation. But when they command you to have a particular number of slides, okay, so time constraint is one stressor. And you might get a time constraint right before you walk on. Oh, the CEO went over by 15 minutes, so you need to cut 15 minutes of your speech. That can bring massive stress. And that is why a professional already knows in chunks how long their speech takes. And they know, okay, I'm going to take out slides 10 through 15, and that section is now gone. Boom, I'm off to the races. But when you do TED Talks, your time is constrained, but and not even to the degree that you're talking about. But then there's those other kinds of talks, and I don't even know what they're called, where they say you can only have so many slides, and this is how often you have to basically be so rehearsed that can send some signals to your brain, fight or flight type stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And going back to what you said about mindset, this is a tool that I use and I learned from a mentor along the way many years ago when I was just doing speaking and in corporate. But I talked about being nervous, and his response to me is, you must be focused more on impressing people than you are on influencing people. And from that point forward, I'm telling you, my nervousness, my stress level going into a speech fell dramatically. And it was a mental shift. Now, before I go in, part of my rehearsals, or part of my ritual is I'm looking at the crowd and I'm thinking to myself, who needs to hear this? What do they need to hear? How am I going to change lives out there? How am I going to better lives, not just them, but the people they influence on a daily basis? And that changes my perspective of this is about me, or this is about me impressing someone, or being worried that I'm not going to, or someone's not going to like me, or I'm gonna flub up and say something wrong. That's where our nervousness comes from. Now I focused it. The mindset is focusing now on the people and what they can get out of it.
Yeah, I think that is so helpful, especially when it's what I would call a getting back on the horse speech. If you have had a bad outing, which everybody has had at one time or another, the next time when you focus on, I need to do so much better, you're focusing inward. And when you say, okay, let me take the focus off of myself and my performance and what I did wrong last time and all of that, when you put the focus outward back to them and how your content can be meaningful to them, you said one of your questions for yourself is, who needs to hear this? I am here for somebody to get this message today, could be your mantra that would then take you out of your head and out of your ego and onto service and, providing something for somebody in that audience who needs to hear it. And that is so beneficial. Okay, so we've talked about stress as being one of the reasons why people can get off their game. You have a couple of others that you've talked about, one of them being distraction. Talk about what do you mean by distraction being a performance blocker?
Yeah, so when you look at the flow cycle, there are four kind of core areas, four phases you go through.
Okay.
The first phase is the struggle phase. And this, by the way, this is if you're, playing a sport, maybe you're like surfing. Surfing's on my mind because I'm going surfing next week in Costa Rica.
Yay!
But that's what, and maybe this is when you go work out. If you're a runner, I'm more of a sitter than a runner, but I do go run. And that first minute to 3 minutes are tough. Your body is saying, I'm going to die here. You need to stop. But the struggle, how about writing? When you write, no one likes to sit down right at the beginning and start writing, because you got to get into it. You got to get your mind around it. And what's happening is you're actually excreting cortisol and adrenaline at that time, because your body is going into that threat mode. That's the struggle. I don't want to do this. And your brain says, let's leave this. And the next phase is more of this release phase. And then you go into a flow. Then you hit flow. It's where the release phase actually is where you go from beta in the struggle, beta brain waves, to alpha brain waves. You go from cortisol and adrenaline. When you get into the release phase, which is a moment where your body says, oh, I got this. You kind of settle down, you release, and literally your brain, you can see it in brain scans, nitric oxide is released, and it clears out the stress hormone of cortisol and adrenaline. And then your brain goes into theta waves, and then it releases dopamine. It releases serotonin, anandamide. Actually, when you get into flow, you're releasing anandamide, which is a hormone that actually focuses on the area of your brain that's sensitive. It acts like a THC. So it's kind of like a stress reliever, but at the same time, a feel good effect on your brain. And then you finally, after moving through all that, you get into this recovery stage. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because that's one of the most important pieces of this. But let's go back to the struggle. Here's what happens is your struggle is where your brain says, I want to do something else besides what's difficult right here, because this is threatening to me. Right. So when the struggle phase for a lot of speakers is right before we go on, and our brain's saying, is being distracted by other things. What are people doing? What are people going to say when I get up on stage? What does my mic sound like? And our brain is attuned to these things, both consciously and subconsciously. And so what we want to do is understand that in that struggle phase, there's lots of distraction. And we're thinking about, how do we bust through that distraction to get to where we want to go? And so when I'm thinking from a performance perspective, any type of performance, speech, or even when you're writing, my mindset is to embrace that struggle, but to blast through it, to break through it. Understand there's going to be all these things around me that are going to distract me and trying to keep me from the flow stage. So here's what I'm thinking is, what's most important to me when I step up on stage? What do I focus on during this struggle, which is typically the first, from right when you step on to probably about 2 to 3 minutes into, will you get your flow, right?
And you just go, yes.
Yeah. So one of them is breathing.
Focus
How many
on
speakers
breathing.
have you seen that don't breathe well? So slow down. Your adrenaline is high. Your cortisol is high. We have to slow down. And by the way, we think we're slowing down, but it doesn't look like we're slowing down to the audience, because our brain is in high gear in the struggle phase.
And how important is it that you're getting oxygen to the brain before you go on anyway? I mean, that's what's feeding your mental clarity, is it not? So
it is. And so this is
part of your mantra, or part of your pre-gig ritual, let's call it, could be long, slow breaths, quiet space. Some people listen to music. Some people are saying their mantra over and over again. What are a couple of other things that you might do to get into that preparation phase, so that you can kind of blast through struggle in the early moments of your speech?
Yeah, so I think number one most important thing, I believe, is doing some type of breathing method. And so you're saturating your brain with oxygen. That's one of the best things you can do. Also, it keeps you focused in on what that breathing is, and not thinking about the audience or thinking about what might happen or these things around. So I highly looking at things like box breathing. It's used by Navy SEALs and Green Berets, as well as Olympic athletes. You can find things on YouTube on that related to how to box breathe. The other thing is mindset focus. So what are you saying to yourself in terms of getting in tune with your mindset? And then I like to say, there are 3 core elements of most speeches. Have one word for each of those, and you're focused on those 3 words. This gets you kind of focused in on what
know where you're going,
what your outcomes are, where where, and even if you know that, and you could just say that in your sleep, keep saying it, focus on that, because
Yes.
that's going to keep your brain focused on where you're going. So
Yeah.
yes, you're exactly right. Part of this is breathing, but when you get out on stage, what you want to do to break through is you're thinking about that first connection. And for me, that's what I do. It is breathing well, and then breaking through to the connection. In fact, one of the things I say from a mindset standpoint is nothing great is done without a struggle first, without a bit of that pushback
Yeah.
first. And stepping on that stage is that first pushback. So what do I tell myself? I'm going to embrace this. And
Mm.
my goal is to make a connection with the audience. So one of the things I do is I like to go out, breathe well, relax, slow down, walk out to the front of the stage,
Yeah.
look
Front
at
center.
people very closely, like I'm
Yes.
wanting to, and I'm not standing back, but I'm wanting, and then I move into what my initial opening is.
Okay.
And what I'm looking for me is I'm looking for eyes and smiles and connection for me.
Mhm.
That helps me. Now, it might be different for someone else.
Yes.
But for me,
Everybody has to have their own ritual, their own first few minutes out on the stage. So, do you have a graphic of the struggle, release, flow, recovery piece?
yeah,
Can
I got one right
can we put a copy of that in the show notes? I would
here.
love to have something that's a little better than my notes here.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And you
so
can find this online as well. It's not my this is what's in the literature, what's in the research
about flow.
about flow theory.
Okay. And I love geeking out on all the different elements of chemistry that are going on in your brain. I mean, it's really quite it.
Yeah.
When you study the brain, are you not just blown away by how does it produce all this stuff? I mean, it's really quite phenomenal what our brain is capable of, and all of the things that can bring it either joy or fear or pain or whatever it
Yes.
might be. It's
Yeah.
so interesting to me to really study that.
It is, and this is one of the reasons why I have a passion for it, why it's
Yeah.
become such a big part of what I talk about, part of my life. And it's the most, everyone has the most amazing, the most valuable, most intricate and complex and powerful item in the universe. And that's
Yes.
our brain. And
Yeah.
so, and here's the thing, when you're thinking about, do you want to be your best? Do you want to perform your best? Do you want to live your best life? Then you got to optimize your brain, right? And so many people, I show this up on a couple of my slides, is an F Formula One car, which is worth millions of dollars, is fine-tuned in every piece of that. And they're not going to put a bad part on that car, nor give it bad fuel, right?
Right.
That's how our brain is. And I show the next slide, and it's an old jalopy car. And I'm like, unfortunately, many of us treat our brains like this, right? And so as speakers, as performers, as people who want to give our best to people, we have to optimize ourselves. And there's lots of ways to do that, but it starts at, how do we fuel ourselves? How do we treat, what are some of the basic hygiene things
Yeah.
that a lot of, like, I work with executives all the time that they're not doing, and they're shortening their impact over time and longevity, and at the same time they're also not performing at the level and having the impact they possibly can.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the busy life that a speaker may have and how easy it might be, especially if you're doing a ton of traveling, to get completely out of balance. The fuel that you're putting into your machine is no longer as good because you're traveling. So you have to really be intentional about that and make some good choices maybe ahead of time. Sleep is something that, I don't know about you, but the first night in a hotel, I don't sleep well. The second night I do. And I have this little Aura ring. I don't know if you have an Aura ring.
Well, I took mine off. I have
You
one
have
as
an
well.
Aura ring also.
Yep.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the Aura ring. Each morning, I kind of look at, well, what is my readiness score? And so it gives you a score out of 100. And if I'm like 80 or above, I think, okay, I'm not having to pull it out of the weeds here today. But if I'm speaking that day and I haven't slept well and I'm rating like a 60 or a 70, I know that I am going to have to summon strength from somewhere else because I didn't get it from sleep, from recharging. I'm like on average an over 8 hour a night sleeper. I know a lot of people will gasp, especially people with young children. What? You're so lucky. This is very, very intentional. We go to bed early, and that's what it takes for me to get my 8. So
Yeah,
talk about
absolutely.
your ring.
Yeah, and so I agree. I really look at deep sleep on mine because it will deep sleep is the real recovery sleep.
So
That's
what do
what your
you get
brain
on
will do.
average? Tell me, Jason, what do you get on average for deep?
I on
Because I
average
don't get
get
much.
yeah, I on average get about 50 minutes to an hour. If I'm
Oh,
over an hour, I'm really happy. But what I'm trying to
okay.
do is I continue to try to hack myself to get more than an hour of deep sleep.
How do
And so
you do that? Tell me how you do that.
well, I'm still working on figuring out what is the best for me.
Okay.
So certainly trying to block out blue light, I think is helping me at night.
Yeah.
Um, Having a relaxation kind of ritual before I go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
Having things very dark in my room
Yes.
and blocking out any type of noise. Sometimes I'll have kids and animals and things like that. All these things
Yes.
inhibit you because it's a cycle. It's a
Yes.
cycle of what you have to different sleep waves. And to get to that sleep, you have to move through these cycles to get there, and you can be easily brought out of it.
Right.
So, but
That's good. I mean,
just like
I'm doing a lot of those things already on my iPad, which is my primary reading source. There's a nighttime setting, and inside the books that I read, there's like a sepia tone to try to get that blue light feeling going. And I'm trying to do all these things, but I'm really lucky if I get an hour. I
yeah,
probably average about 30 to 40 minutes of
yeah,
deep sleep. Okay. So I get 8 hours, but deep is the important part. So
yeah.
that's really interesting. All of the suggestions that you're making and winding down from your devices anyway. I know I would do better, but this is how I read is
Yeah.
on my iPad. So it's hard for me to be device free. Um,
One of the things too, I would
Go ahead.
add to that as well is, and this is, I think this is kind of what started you and I having this conversation
Oh yeah.
related to this was, someone had posted a question related to fatigue after giving a
Yes.
presentation. And one of the things that I think is hygiene oriented and optimization oriented for our brain and for our performance is recovery, preparation, obviously, but also recovery as well. And that's a part of
Mhm.
the flow cycle. Is at the end, after we flow, we've got to have some time. How do we recover as people?
Yes.
How do we recover the brain? Now, deep sleep is one of those things, right?
Yes. Yes.
But the one of those things too, I believe, is having understanding what energy, where your energy domains are, and where they come from. And there are four distinct energy domains that's pretty much accepted worldwide across cultures, even across religions and across millennia. And that's the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual domains of our lives, of our being. And this is nothing new that I'm sharing, but I like to think of this in terms of how do I recover. Active recovery is very important for being able to get your immune system back if it's had any type of damage related to stress and hormone changes. It also helps you to rest better. It helps you to essentially be able to get your brain waves in a better place and more back into equilibrium. And
Mhm.
and I think from a perspective, and so one of my answers that I gave to that person was that remember that when we are speaking on stage, we're giving of all four of those domains. If I'm sitting here and I'm writing a book, I'm mainly giving of my mental uh, energy and
Okay.
maybe a bit of some emotional energy too with it, right?
Right.
Um, but when we're on stage, we are giving physical, we are standing, we are moving, we're giving
Mhm.
mental, our mind, we're also giving emotional. Right?
Hmm.
I mean, we are giving of ourselves, and how is this connection with other people? And then
Yes.
finally, I believe there's a spiritual element of this. If you're
Yes.
doing it right, I think successful people who are doing this, there's got to be that spiritual element, which it's not a religion per se. It is what is outside of you. This is what are you giving back, and how are you serving, and what is outside of you that actually grows you? That paradox of giving that also fills you up, right?
And you're
And
on purpose when you're speaking, right? Some people
yeah,
are very much on purpose and they're
if
doing
they're
good work,
clear,
good work in the world. Yeah.
that's right.
I was the one who asked the question
Oh, okay.
because when I gave a presentation recently, only 90 minutes, at the end of it, people would come up and talk to me, and I was really tapped out. I didn't have a lot of good quality advice for them or good quality even conversation for them because I was spent. And so I said to other people online, do you ever feel completely wiped after a presentation? And I couldn't believe even the people who have been in the business for 30 years said, oh yeah, we give it all up and then you're done. And so a lot of people had some recovery things that they did. They're very clear. Okay, I'm going to go back to my hotel room and I'm going to do this for X number of minutes in order to recover and wind down and get myself back. But I think it's really interesting that there are people out there who can go and then, sure, I'll come to your dinner afterwards. Sure, I'll come do this afterwards. That's not me. I don't have anything left in the tank after even a short 90-minute presentation. I have nothing left. And I recognize now that I just need to, say that to people so that they don't expect too much from me
Yeah, yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
some of that can be some differences between people in terms of physical stamina, mental stamina, emotional, those
Mhm.
sorts of things. I'm the same way. And always been that way. I politely decline most things afterwards unless it's something that is really important or that the
Mm.
client really wants me to be at.
Yes.
But what I try to remember that I'm giving of all four of those areas. And because I'm giving out of all four of those areas, by the way, these four areas, these things are ancient, right? These are back
Yes.
almost every religious, when you
Not
look at
new
Pentateuch,
information.
you look at the Quran, you look at the Bible, Old Testament, even in
Mhm.
Eastern religions, you'll see that these four kind of core things are important. There's something there with this. And when it comes to the recovery place, our bodies after that is saying, I need to rejuvenate. I need to get back into equilibrium. Why? So that I can do this again. And so, whether it's at the end of a long, tough day for an executive, or if it's at the end of
Mhm.
a great presentation by a speaker, um,
Mhm.
honor yourself by allowing yourself to have that recovery. Because Jane, what's happened here from a uh, neuroscience perspective is that you have spent a great deal of time with your brain in these theta waves. Your brain is excreting all these different chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, and anandamide, also adrenaline as well in there. And when you shift out of that, your brain then goes to delta. And guess what? Guess what chemicals are now being excreted to you?
What?
Serotonin and oxytocin.
Oh.
And those are the two that are relaxants. Those are the two that, yeah, and your brain goes into delta mode. And guess
Uh-huh.
what delta brainwave is best for? It's
Sleep.
best for sleep and relaxation. So here's what I believe in myself, and that is when I leave it all out on the stage, I'm giving from all four of those domains, right?
Mhm.
And that actually equips me to better move into this recovery stage and allows me to even sleep better. It's my
Oh,
point.
interesting.
I've left it all out on the field, right?
Okay. That's
And
good.
now my body's saying, let's recover this so you can do it again.
That's so good. Looking at the time here, and we could talk about this all day long. Dr. Jason Jones, I am so thrilled that you came on to share some ideas for speakers on how to keep their energy at the peak performance levels. Tell everybody if they want to connect with you, what's your primary source of connection that you prefer on social media, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. So directly to my website is drjasonjones.com.
Okay.
Also Instagram, probably the second best, is DRJ Jones. And then there's LinkedIn as well. And
Awesome.
and that's Dr. Jason Jones 1, because there must have been someone else who got the regular Dr.
Yeah,
Hey, but at least I got the website, right?
I'm Jane Atkinson 1. I know what you're talking about. Okay, we're going to get some graphics from you, and we're going to put some links to books and things like that into the show notes. Be sure to check those afterwards. Thank you all for listening, and I hope that you will let us know if you have some comments or ideas that you would like to share with us. Also, reach out if there's anything in your speaking business that we can help you with. Just reach out, jane@speakerlauncher.com, and we will direct you in the right direction. Thank you, Jason, for being here with us today. And with that, we'll say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. If you need help building the speaking business of your dreams, head over to wealthyspeakerschool.com and take advantage of our 20-minute next step call. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast.